Let's go ahead and get started. So for today's agenda, we'll be starting off with a lot of our core community updates and metrics, just checking in on the pulse of all the contributions that the community has been making towards open metadata. We'll run through the numbers. And then after that, we'll be digging into data discovery, where we'll be sharing more about a lot of the new features and usages for data discovery and give you an update on what's been going on there. As a reminder, we'll be sharing the recording for this community meeting up on YouTube shortly hereafter. And if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. We've got a lot of people online who'll be helping to answer questions while the presentation is going on, just to make sure we can get everything answered for everyone here. And we'll try to also leave a little bit of time at the end for some additional Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the numbers. So it's been a great month. We've got 10 new open source developers coming in and making contributions. Again, it's your contributions that make this possible as an open source project. We're very grateful for everyone coming in. And if you've got any questions, you can also join us within our Slack channel. We can help you get started with areas of the open source project that could use some help. We also appreciate your support with our GitHub stars. We're up to another 191 stars since last month. So almost halfway through to 7,000 GitHub stars. It's amazing how fast the star velocity has been for GitHub. It's been quite the hockey stick if you actually go into GitHub star history, how much the community has been contributing to GitHub. Slack is always a great way for us to learn more. You can find all of us on the Open Metadata Slack community. And we'll be sending out the link to that shortly here within chat. You can also find it on our website. Another the new 300 community members. We're close to 9,000 people within Open Metadata Slack. So it's really great to see, if you come in there, if you got any questions, join our office hours that we hold on a regular basis there, ask questions with other contributors. It's a great way to connect with others and also with some of the speakers that we have during our monthly meetups. And in addition with our community, you can also find us on Meetup as well as on Twitter. And it's great to see that it's also grown another 247 people there as well. So great to see all this growth within the community. Let's keep going into some additional metrics. We've had 449 PRs in the last 4 weeks and 493 questions in the last 4 weeks as well. Really great to see people using open metadata and having questions about the open metadata and our ability to collectively as a community get those questions answered so that you can be successful getting open metadata up and running and into production within your environments, and also all the different PRs that's continually growing to help create more features and functionality for all of you. You'll see ongoing, you can see all the different questions that have been coming in and our ability to resolve them. It's a lot of some bugs, some feature requests, but also the ability for us to then resolve these questions as a community, as well as the number of Slack posts that we've got ongoing through our Open Metadata Slack. Oh, let's actually take a look at the community contributions. Similar to all the people on this meetup today, this is a very international set of names. I'm not going to try reading these names. I've learned the hard way, but I really can tell by reading them just how global our contributors are. From reading this, it seems like we've got a lot of people from all around the world making contributions and putting in code to open metadata. With that, let me pass the baton to Pare, who'll be telling us a lot more about data discovery on open metadata. But Pare, let me pass the baton to you.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Super happy to see you all here. And let's get started. And the main foundation of the talk today is that the data infrastructure and platforms are evolving, right? Every time it's now easier and easier and easier to store and to process large amounts of data. So just a simple data platform using this new modern data stack can easily be based in a bunch of different components. So we would start with these transactional databases, basically powering our business through some early ingestion ELT tools, moving the data into the initial storage layer, then start all of these transformations maybe with Spark and Databricks until things land into the warehouse, and then moving along into visualization layers or ML tools, right? So as you can see, here we have all of these different and growing set of tools, but it's not only the complexity on the data side and on the infra side, it's also how companies are evolving on who is using the data and how. Because the data is not only handled by a central data team of engineers and analysts anymore. The usage of data itself is being democratized and adopted by every other part of the organization. So we have on one hand the typical topical data engineers, the new analytics engineers, and BI people. So these more data background folks. But then we start having business users, marketing teams, and legal folks. And all of these different personas, they all have their own very specific set of backgrounds and skills and tools that they know how to use, and also a very much different set of needs versus these traditional data teams. So here, if I were to ask in this room, hey, how many of you actually want to be data-driven? Or how many of you want to play with the latest, newest AI agent and automation tools? I'm sure that everyone is going to raise the hand. But before we can actually get into this stage, into building beautiful applications with our data, we need to answer a set of questions. We need to solve a very static and big set of pain points that all of the users have, regardless if they come from this more data traditional background or all of these new teams in the companies, all of these new set of personas that also need to jump in and start using this data. And the first question would be, hey, where is my data? Where can I find it? The second being, what is this data that I'm finding it? What does it mean? How can I understand it? And finally, going and saying, hey, how do I use this data? How do I activate? What's the best way for me to extract the insights that I need from all of this moving and flowing and evolving complexity of this new data stack that we have? Now, these might be like simple questions, but they are actually not simple at all to answer, right? And the complexity is not only on the bottom part, is not only on how this infrastructure and these platforms are evolving, it's also from a people and from an organizational perspective, because in the end, each organization will have their own different set of requirements, cadences on the evolution, the adoptions, and all of these different teams, they might not always be talking into each other and collaborating. And that's why we have not only one problem to solve, that is, how do I make sense of the data? It's also, how do I make sense of the data with the context of all of these people that we need to put together so that they can collaborate and they can build together into achieving the goals of their organization, right? So it's not data working in isolation or people working in isolation. It's actually how can we encompass these two different things into a single platform. And that is why we've built OpenMetadata to be this unified platform to bring all of these personas together so that they can collaborate with each other. And also, how can we bring all of these different sets of metadata that we have into our platform so that we can discover, understand, observe it, and govern it, right? So in order to start, the first step that we would have to make as an admin of the tool would be to take inventory of the tools that we have. And in order to take this inventory, in order to start bridging the gap between all of these different tools that right now are siloed and scattered, we have built more than 90 integrations that we bring out of the box to automatically start extracting all of the relevant metadata from the systems. So let's just start taking a look into how an admin of the tool, how an admin of OpenMetadata can start bridging this first gap here. So this would be my landing page as the admin of OpenMetadata. And if I want to start connecting to my source systems, I can head here into settings. And we have this concept of services. And this is a very handy concept because basically what we're saying is a service is a bridge between the real world, our data platform, the physical services that we have in our infrastructure, and OpenMetadata. And we bring these connectors for many different pieces, right? It's not only for databases, it's also for your messaging, maybe your Kafka, your Red Panda topics. So for Looker, Tableau, Power BI, for your pipelines such as Airflow or Spark, for MLflow if you're using it. So in the end, we have built all of these connectors across this data stack so that regardless of the tooling that you use, you can getting started picking up and inventorizing the sets of data that you have in your platform. So in this case, I'm going to follow the process on how I would add a new connection to a database. So I'll just go and from this list, I'm going to select Snowflake. We can give a name to our service, whatever it is that makes sense for us, in order to start identifying which pieces of data we can expect to find within here. So this case, just give it a simple demo name. And we want to make sure that this process is as easy and as straightforward as possible. So in order to create this service, we just need to fill in this form based on the requirements and the specifications that you can also find directly from within the UI. So if I know that I need to extract certain pieces of metadata from Snowflake, such as the tables, the databases, the lineage, the usage, I need to create some new role, assign it to a user, prepare the new password, and start filling in all of these details. So that whenever I'm done, I can just test the connection, make sure that I did not miss anything specific about my requirements. So this is actually going to help us ensure that we are actually going to be able to access all of these different phases of the metadata that we want to exploit, and then we can just move on. So I'm not going to actually do that now. I'm just going to show you how things are going to look like after we have created this service. And as you can see, there's many different pieces of metadata that we can extract. We can start with the most basic technical metadata, which is, hey, I want to understand the shape of my tables. So what's their name, their columns, their types, and the relationships, for example. But that's usually not enough, right? If we do want to start making sense of all of this information that we have in Snowflake, maybe it's also handy for me figure out how other people in the organization or how other processes are using that metadata. So to that end, we have the usage workflow. Or I also want to make sure that I can clearly see how this data is flowing, right? How am I creating new tables or new views based on the ingredients that we have in this Snowflake instance? So we can go and we can prepare the lineage process. And up until this release, the admin of the tool had to come here and bit by bit keep adding all of these agents. But what we want, again, to aim with this new release 1.7 is to make sure that you can put all of your metadata in autopilot. So right now, whenever we get the release out and you start playing with it, after just creating your service, all of these different metadata agents are going to be created and scheduled automatically for you. So again, you don't need to actually just worry about, hey, what's the right approach? What's the right order that I need to create decisions or whatnot? You can just let this autopilot application of OpenMetadata to take care of all of this boilerplate for you so that you sit down, let this start running, and not only running once, not only just bringing this one single snapshot, but also letting it give you a default scheduling system. And that's very powerful, right? Because whenever we're talking about, hey, I want to make an inventory of all my data, it's not only about the data that I have now, because data is alive. Okay, we all know it's not about, hey, what would happen if my data changes? We actually need to frame this question, what will I do when my data changes? How is the system going to react if we add a new table, or if a table that's already existing has a new column or type changes or a column is deleted? So putting your metadata in autopilot is not only going to help you answer and discover your data today, it's also going to help you make sure that all of these processes will keep running, will keep crawling and extracting all of these relevant metadata from your sources. So even when your teams and your processes are going to be evolving, anyone that jumps into open metadata and starts discovering the data and starts trying to use it, they are going to find updated information, right? Because we don't want an analyst or a data scientist or a business user to come here, understand the shape of something, and then whenever they go and run a query, they are like, oh, this column that I was interested in actually just disappeared, right? We don't want this frustration. We want to make sure that everyone can autonomously and independently start working and start making the most out of the data that we have. So making sure that putting your metadata in autopilot through time to ensure the consistency of it, it's going to be super important. So we have come here, we have created this service, we have brought all of these relevant metadata, and now we can try to start making sense of these different boxes that we have. And if we do nothing, in this case, I have here another example with our data lake, we have also built this platform insights page that it's also going to help you from the minute zero understand the distribution of your data assets and kind of giving you some hints on, hey, those are kind of the homework, those are the tasks that you need to do next so that the data, whenever someone is discovering it, it's actually useful. We don't want to end up with a catalog full of tables but empty of information, right? We don't want a data catalog just full of nothingness. So that's why we have all of these coverage pieces in here that are going to help you reach these KPIs, reach these objectives, because one step is connecting to the metadata and extracting what it is into our services, but then the other is actually helping people understand and use it. And to do that, we have basically these four main dimensions here to help you getting started in those tasks so that first of all, you can keep track of the description coverage. This is going to be a key element because you want to make sure that if someone lands into a table or a dashboard, they can actually make sense of that information. Traditionally, if this information is not here, we know that it's going just to become Slack message or a message in Teams or a Jira. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure that whenever people are landing here, they can make the most of our data, right? So making sure that all of these descriptions are up to date, this is going to be super helpful for you and your team. The other aspect is when we're talking about tiers. And this tiering concept is something that we have built here in Open Metadata as a way to distinguish the criticality of our assets. So we have, on one hand, data assets that might be on tier one, a critical source of truth, versus data assets that maybe someone, just a data analyst, a business user, a data engineer, whoever, they just created a temporary table because they were testing something out. So also helping users figure out, hey, what's the most important table? What is that one that you are actually encouraging me to use? It's also going to help them find the right data and make the most out of it from minute zero. We also have then the PII coverage, right? And this is going to be especially important for governance people and for compliance reasons. How do we make sure that we are not spilling PII data into specific dashboards that maybe are public facing? Or how are we actually transforming and are we really anonymizing or encrypting this PII information into our sources? So keep building and adding and classifying this data is going to be a key part of your governance strategy, as well as making sure that your data is properly owned. Because a database itself that is not owned, we might really just not go and use it because the time that we rely on it and start building data products on top of that, and there's some issue that is happening on that database, there's not going to be anyone behind that will be able to support us. So making sure that the right pieces of data have someone really managing that health and making sure that it's in the right shape with the right descriptions, the right tier, the right information for anyone to use is going to become a critical part again of our governance strategy. However, all of this is a ton of work, right? How do we move from this percentages into something like that, it means that either someone or a team already is coming here, trying to understand the data, navigating the platform, adding all of this information and whatnot, right? And this can take years. And it's a hard task. It's an arduous task. And not a lot of people actually want to go and keep tabs on this, right? So in order to help you not only put the metadata in autopilot, but also all of this documentation layer on top of your data in autopilot, as part of Collate, we have also built a set of Collate AI agents so that not only you are again extracting this metadata and these raw resources from your services, but also accelerating and giving you an easier time in order to make sure that your data is properly described and classified and easy to use. So here we have started by building these three different agents, one being our Collate AI documentation agent, which will learn on the shape of your data, basically the schema of your tables, the shape of your sample data, so that we can actually automatically generate some of these descriptions. And we are also having a nice text to SQL layer on top of that that can become very handy for those other personas that we want to encourage to bring into the platform that might not be that versed into SQL, right? So having not only this documentation, but this other nice and comfortable interface to explore the data in SQL is also going to be very powerful. On the other hand, we also have this Collate AI quality agent that first is going to review, okay, what are the constraints of my tables, right? And that's already going to give us kind of a quick set of data quality tests that are going to be automatically generated so that we know that those keys are properly behaving into our data. But also it's going to basically compare the shape of the tables and say, hey, if I have a neighbor table that has this and that data quality tests, and that table is similar to me, maybe it might make sense also for me to have this test as well. So this AI agent is going to automatically add these tests into the table. And finally, going back into this tier concept, into the importance of our table, this tier agent is going to take into account the usage of our data, right? How other people, how other processes are querying this data. Maybe we have one table that is queried hundreds of times per day, and then another table that really no one is looking at anymore. And we can also learn from the lineage of our data, right? How is it flowing? How other assets are being created based on me? So taking into consideration this information, we are also going to start adding these coverages to help you get kind of a quick start on the descriptions and the tiers and the PII and the ownership. So this would be kind of a first approach from an admin perspective. How can I start bridging this gap from the infrastructure into open metadata? And how can it help me into ensuring that even though my data is going to evolve and even though all of these documentation efforts can be huge, I'm just not always starting from a blank page. So this would be from my admins. But then we also have the challenge that data does not live in isolation, right? We are building data, we're building all of these products so that someone else in the organization can actually use them. But additionally, there's been kind of this gap, right, between the business world, between these new personas that are trying to make use of our data and this more traditional data world. And what is happening in there is that oftentimes governance and business people, they come here and say, hey, maybe this data is not solving my needs, it's not answering my questions. So I'll just go and silo my data again. I'll just go and rely on my Excel sheets that I'm exporting from certain database because I just need an ad hoc solution and I'll go and do that for myself. But then we also have the counterpoint of view from these traditional data teams that will come and will say, well, but the other teams in the organization, they don't really know how to use that data properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, these kind of conversations, they are not helping us, right? We need to figure out what's the best way for us to jump this back. How can we make sure that while bringing all of this technical perspective on our data, we can figure out what does it mean for the business and help people on the business world to actually get and start pulling the thread and give them the right understanding of the data that they have. So in this case, another part that can be very, very handy, if we go here into our governance tab, we have the glossary, right? So in order to make sure that we are bridging this gap, we need to start by creating a common language. We need to start by solving one of the biggest problems that the organizations have, that is, oh, this team actually is talking about accounts, and this other team calls them accountant ID, and this other team calls them ACC, and another team calls them ACC underscore ID. So how do we make sure that we are actually centralizing, and how do we make sense and follow the exact same definitions for all of these terms, which might be maybe a silly example if we are talking here about account IDs, but what happens if we start trying to compute the customer lifetime value? This is going to be a key metric for our business. That's actually one of the main pieces that we want to track, and that it's going to tell our exec level, hey, is the company going into the right direction or not? So we need to make sure that regardless where you come from the organization, you can go and you can give the same answer. So in order to achieve that, I have created here kind of my financial services glossaries so that we can start putting together and creating all of this language for the organization, so that I can come. For example, I have here my customer lifetime value. I can make sense of it. I can come, I can understand it. I can also see maybe what are the synonyms, how I can hear this term being used in other parts of the organization. Maybe it's only lifetime value about LTV or the full lifetime value stream. So as a governance users, one of my main pain points, one of my main challenges is going to be, hey, I need to come here and I need to make sure that we are actually reaching an agreement on the language that we want to use in our organization. So one way is going to be, hey, I just come here, I start adding all of these terms, but also another handy way is that you can actually also import all of this information from maybe another CSV that you have lying around, because you might not be starting this governance strategy from scratch. Maybe you already have some Confluence pages or some Excel sheets where you are starting to put together this glossary information, so you can come here and directly import all of this data in bulk. But also you might want to collaborate, right? You might want to kind of say, hey, I'm the guardian of the glossary. I'm going to have the last word here to make sure that all of the pieces of information that are flowing and that are landing in the glossary here that we have in OpenMetadata actually do make sense from a governance perspective. So in this case, we also have put into place this governance approval workflow so that I have certain admin, certain user that it's going to be a reviewer. So any kind of changes that are going to happen to these terms, or anyone else that is trying to come here and say, hey, actually, in our part of the organization, we are talking about this super useful and commonly used term, they can come here, they can suggest and create this term, and then it's up to me, hey, do I want to prove it or do I want to reject it? So this would be one part on how I can actually come here and start making sense of this scattered language on my organization. But then again, how does it bridge the gap, right? What can I do once I have all of these terms into the glossary? How do I make sure that they are properly reaching the data that the admin has previously ingested into the platform? So in this case, I can come here into my customer lifetime value, and once I understand it, I am also able to add assets that I know that are talking about the customer lifetime value. So as a governance user, I start my discovery flow from this strategic perspective, from this business-centric perspective, so that whenever I land into the term that makes sense to me, I'm just finding the right table, and now I can start making sense of the table itself, right? And then I can also do this journey the other way around, where whenever I find my right piece of data, and I'm able to figure out, okay, this is my customers table, it belongs to a certain domain, I know that it's owned by the data team, I know also that it's important because we have this tier one here, I know that I can start to make sense of this description and about the shape of the data, and I can also come here and say, hey, this column is actually talking about this customer lifetime value. If I need more information about this column, if I actually need to kind of pull the thread a bit more to keep understanding and keep bridging, in this case, from my technical perspective into my business perspective, I can just click again and start getting all of these missing details that I might have. So this is going to be super handy, but then you can say, well, that's fine, but what do I need to do? Do I need to kind of just come here and keep adding the terms, or whenever I'm into my tables, I can keep again to crawl from all of my information and start adding all of these tags and all of these classifications. So we are also trying to help you into getting these things done via automations. Right? In the end, from a governance perspective, what we want to make sure is that the data that we have is following a nice set of rules, right? For example, one rule would be, I do need my data to be owned, and maybe say, hey, all of the tables, past, present, and future that belong to this data lake or that belong to this Snowflake service, they should be part to the data team. So I can come and I can create this governance recipe that automatically is going to add this ownership. And again, I can also schedule it. So it's not about covering and keeping tabs of the data that I have today. It's also making sure that our governance team can scale as the data grows, can scale as the data changes in the origin. So the admins have said these nice scheduled processes that are going to give me the updated pieces of metadata. I also need to make sure that these new pieces of metadata are nice and controlled and governed. So one example would be, hey, I want to add this ownership. Another example would be, hey, every time that I find a column that is called bank account, I need to make sure that it follows the right glossary term, and it's also tagged with certain classification. Or if we are talking about social security numbers, we want to make sure that, hey, I really can't miss any PII tag into my social security numbers, because that's going to trigger other encryption strategies that I might need to hook up into the system as well, right? So we can also start the search and these processes so that these columns are properly tracked. But it's also important that we can start kind of joining all of these different contexts, right? Because I'm saying, hey, from the admin perspective, I'm giving all of this nice metadata. I'm getting the schemas, I'm getting the lineage. So if I do have this lineage, do I really need to repeat myself and just kind of copy paste the same descriptions for the columns and assign the tags and the glossary terms and whatnot to a bunch of places where my data is flowing? Not at all. We can also come here and we can prepare and let, in this case, this collate automation to go and propagate and make sure that all of our data is going to be properly updated and compliant from a governance perspective as well. So that as an end user, whenever I come here and I start searching for customers, I know that I'm going to get information that makes sense. So here, as you can see, I've searched from these customers, and I get that I have quite a few tables. I have databases that are also talking about customers. I have dashboards data models, which might be or not interesting for me, depending on the use case that I have in mind. But directly here from this Explore page, this is going to help me kind of have a quick first look into the data that I have. So in this case, I get these table customers first. Why am I getting first? Because first of all, it's tagged as tier 1. So from an open metadata perspective, we know that then this table is going to be important. And maybe there's, again, as you can see, the customers edge is also matching the staging customers and the raw customers. But this customers table, it's tier 1. It's the most important. That's the one that I want to appear first for my users to start discovering so that they can come, they can have a quick look into the descriptions and the schemas of these tables so that here I can say, hey, I'm actually really interested into understanding the customer lifetime value. So I can come and I can commit a bit more into how do I search and how do I experiment and pull the thread onto my data. And also what it's interesting here is that this can become a collaborative experience. Again, as we were saying, we are bringing in not only the metadata, but also all of these different user personas. So if I'm landing into this table as a business user and I know that, hey, this description is okay, but I might actually be able to come up with something that's a bit better, I can come and directly request an update of this description. So I can come, say that this is better, and I'm directly opening a task for the owners of this data. So again, I don't need to go away from open metadata. I don't need to send an email. I don't need to open a Jira. I have all of this context and all of the information directly within the platform. That I can help improving that, and that's great. I come here and I have the tools to do so. And then the data team can choose if they actually accept my suggestion or not. But I have this independence into coming here, and we are also bringing a way to encourage this crowdsourcing of the information so that it becomes consistent and useful again through time. So even if at some point we are not kind of being able to automatically extract the right descriptions from the sources or whatnot, we know that there's other ways and other processes built in the platform so that the next person that comes and discovers the same piece of data, they can actually make the most of it. And again, as a data user, I could come here and kind of keep pulling the thread and understanding my information. So I can keep discovering, for example, by association. I see here that my customers table is frequently joined via this customers ID to my orders table. So I can come and I can start exploring this orders table. Or maybe I'm interested into reviewing the observability for my tables. Or I need to actually understand a bit the lineage that I have here because maybe I'm just debugging a certain issue. So I can come and I can start kind of pulling the thread. Okay, what's the origin of this customer ID, or this first name might be a bit more interesting. Where does it originate and how is it being used down the line? So we are having all of these different views, all of these different approaches, again, automatically extracted from our system. However, we also need to take into consideration that we are working with all of these different personas. And all of these different personas, they might actually be looking at the data through different lenses. So a same piece of data, there might be a specific subset of information that's important for a governance user and another subset of information that's important for a business user. So as a data engineer, what I usually like to see is, hey, I need to keep tabs of my observability and my data quality tests. And I need to ensure that I have a great access to the lineage so that first I can understand what is the root cause of any of the issues that I'm debugging, as well as understanding the impact that this issue is going to happen. But maybe a data scientist has a completely different use for the data. Maybe they are just, first of all, interested on really understanding the shape and the functional knowledge of that data, while also being independent and autonomous enough to go through the UI and create all of these data quality tests. And maybe on the other hand, we have an operations user or a business user that we know that they might not be that handy with the data and they can easily get overwhelmed. So how do we make sure that we can cater the needs of all of these different personas? So we have different personas on one hand, and we also have different organizations on one hand. So maybe the classification of tiers for one company is going to be useful, but another company is using a different kind of architecture and they say, hey, actually tiers are not interesting to me. I am talking about the certifications of my data. I know that I have bronze, silver, and gold information, and I really don't care about tiers. I really don't care about usage because I know that maybe some of my staging or bronze tables, they are queried because I have a lot of validations and a lot of processes in there, but that's not really the ones that I want my end users to work with, right? So we need to figure out, hey, what's the best way to cater to the needs of different personas and manage these different usages and this different understanding of the data that different organizations have. So in order to take care of this problem, again, in the release 1.7, we have a couple of very cool new features. One being the search relevancy settings. And if we come here into the settings, into preferences and search, here we can now actually play and tune, hey, which are the assets that are going to appear on top, right? This one that I was showing you, that I'm coming here and I'm looking for customers, I see that this table is appearing top because it has tier one and because it has certain usage. So all of these things now are at your fingertips directly here from this global setting, when you can actually play and say, hey, out of the box, this search might be working for my neighbor, but it's not working good enough for me. I need to apply other rules. So maybe I want to completely disregard the tiering search and I want to add boosting for these other tags, for example, the certification. Or I don't want the search to kind of match the descriptions of the columns or whatnot, because I want to enforce people to, I don't know, just kind of keep the names of the warehouse tables a bit simpler. So I just want to make sure that, hey, I am searching only based on the keyword of my table. So all of these different tunings, all of these different approaches on how we can help the users find the right piece of data is something that now you can tune and you can play here from these search preferences. So that would help us into figuring out, as an organization, how can I help people find the right piece of data so that we can move some of the noise away. But then there's the other challenge that we were talking here about. Okay, I have all of these different personas and I don't want certain users to feel overwhelmed, right? Maybe we have someone that comes from the finance team. Maybe they have run 10 queries in all of their life, right? They don't really care about lineage. They don't really care about data quality. They don't really care about layers or data lakes or anything like that. They just need to know how can they take this data to start building out some dashboards somewhere else. So in this case, now I have logged in here as a business user. And as you can see, my landing page is way, way simpler compared to my admin user or to my data team. So here I see all of these activity feeds and certain shapes into my landing page. I can also come and directly jump into the lineage and observability layers and whatnot. But really, business users, they don't care about that. And we don't want, again, them to be lost. We want them to make sure that they can keep the focus onto what's the easiest and fastest way to give them access to the right piece of data. So I can come, I can make sure that their navigation panel is super simple. I can also make sure that whenever they come here, as you can see, via some settings that I have previously set as well, when they are searching for customers, they are only finding the relevant information for them because they don't care about other dashboard data models or anything like that. They just need to come here and be able to explore the tables. So we can also narrow down the results of the data and keep playing with these search boosting strategies so that we know that if at any point in time someone is going to look for customers' information, they are actually going to land into my right customers table because it's the one with the right tier and it's the one with the right usage. And then if they decide that this table is interesting for them, look at how simple this navigation now becomes for this user. I can go into the exact same table from my admin or from my data user, and I see the schema and the sample data, queries and observability. But again, these business users, they don't care. They might actually even be lost just by talking about schema. They know that there's something that it's data dictionary. So we can even rename these tabs as well for them so that they can just focus on to, hey, I want to land here, understand my data, maybe take a look at the simple data if we have enabled it, if we think that it can help them, and just move on. So as you can see, from open metadata perspective, we can first of all get all of this information processed and ingested into the platform in autopilot. We just come, prepare this connection once, and let these metadata and AI agents to make sense of our data. We also have all of these nice insights that kind of help me understand how my governance strategies are impacting, right? How much data is being generated by AI? What's my distribution? What's my most used data asset? And even it helps us kind of just drill down into my most expensive queries as well, in case that I need to activate other processes or dig a bit further into that. So all of that thanks to all of these agents. We know that we can also bridge this traditional gap between the business world and the data teams, thanks to being able to centralize all of these definitions in the glossary, as well as automate all of these processes to really try to help and make the lives of our governance teams and our data stewards as simple as possible. We really need to make sure that these people can work at scale and they can actually prepare some recipes that are also going to be consistent through time. And we have also seen how we can tune the search relevancy settings and even the customize the full user journey and the full user experience of these new personas that are being more and more and more involved in the data platform through the search relevancy settings, through the personas customization, so that we help people keep focus, find the data that they need as fast as possible so that they can actually start building insights and start giving value as soon as possible. So I hope that this little presentation was helpful. I think that we still have quite a few minutes, so happy that I was able to make it in time so we can open the door for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Pare, for walking through all that. I really appreciated how you brought the business context to the data and tried to make sure we brought the data in a way that was consumable across the different needs of different teams. So if there's any questions from the audience, I'd love from the community. That'd be a great time for that. You're still speechless, Pare. You've answered all their questions already. I guess one question that I had for Pray was stepping back to creating a common language between data teams and business teams. I know that you were able to you pulled up the glossaries and showed how within the glossaries we can connect the data sets to the business context that they live in. I'm curious how you've seen teams use glossaries and maybe some best practices there in terms of bringing those two worlds together.
Mhm. So usually that's first of all, you need to do kind of an internal exercise within your organization so that you can also try to identify, hey, what does it make sense for us? So basically here we're building all of these possibilities for you to kind of have a nice tree structure so that you can keep coming and collaborating with the different domains. So it's a bit kind of up to you, like, hey, do we want to keep tabs of a single kind of generic glossary and build all of these things internally? That could be one possible approach. Or do we want to kind of separate that into domains because we're also trying to follow kind of these data mesh principles, and we do want to make sure that kind of different parts of the organization also have certain degree of freedom or flexibility onto how they manage their language, right? As long as we make sure that we are not repeating ourselves, that if there's something that ends up being common between two different domains, we try to go and centralize and unify all of these informations. There's not just kind of one golden rule that we can follow here. It's a matter of trying to understanding what are the most important topics from your business, and also figuring out what are kind of the main pain points that currently your users have so that you can start prioritizing, maybe defining those metrics or those pieces of information.
Hmm, got it. Makes sense. Oh, we've got a couple questions coming in on chat. Let me read this one from Keegan. For the profiling configurations on the different data types, we can currently choose which metrics we want to add. With these new agents, will all of these be taken care of and will be reasonable with regards to which kinds of metrics we are calculating on which kinds of data?
Mhm. So no, that's a good question. Thank you, Keegan. So what this autopilot is going to do, it's going to kind of give you a nice profiling default, right? So if I come here and I try to edit, in this case, my profiler, as you
Are
can
you screen
see,
sharing, Pare?
oops, I'm actually not.
Okay, just double checking.
Yeah, no,
There we
thank you,
go. I
James,
see
for
you.
that. Now we go. Yes, I'm just going to go one step before. So I've landed here again into my snowflake. And if we take a look a bit into the shape of this profiler agent, what the autopilot is going to create is kind of a safe enough first version of this workflow. So we're going to say, hey, since there's also the auto tiering agent that it's going to start picking up what are my most important pieces of data, we are going to delegate the profiler agent into just going and scanning kind of the tier one and tier two tables. But the flexibility that was already there about I come here into my customers table, and from my data observability tab, I can play a bit with how much how much data I want to sample, or if this table, I know that there's some columns that we want to exclude and whatnot, those pieces are still going to be there. So you are still able to come and start playing and tuning with that. We will keep working into making these agents smarter and smarter and smarter, because I'm sure that there's kind of certain decisions that we might be able at some point to take out of the box, like some heuristics about, hey, does it really make sense to profile uh, like certain metrics for an ID? Maybe the customer ID column, I just want to know, is it unique and is it null? The rest of the pieces, maybe they are not really giving me good enough value, right? So we will keep improving on to going from this zero to hero on these workflows as much as possible. But for now, we're just taking care of making sure that this first interaction with the platform is fast, is smooth. You get all the workflows, they run, they are scheduled. And then based on the results that you keep getting, you can just keep fine tuning how they are going to behave.
Right. So I'm hearing is that we've got defaults out of the box for how the agents will work through the data, but you can also tune them and set up filtering to get it specific to the behavior that you want it.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for that, Prey. We've got some other questions coming in. Um, so we got the logical versus physical questions answered last. Next question is, does AI agent schedule the ingestion directly in the open metadata version?
Correct. So in open metadata, what it's going to happen for you, there we go, is that all of these metadata agents, we're going to take care of them. So in the end, these metadata usage, lineage, classification, profiler, and whatnot, they are automatically going to be deployed and run for you. What you are not going to see in open metadata are kind of these AI agents. Those are part of the Collate AI suite. But all of this first layer of crawling and scanning and making sense of the data that's already nice and available into the source system, the autopilot is going to take care of that.
Very good. And it looks like you'll do it for both the initial onboarding of the data as well as on an ongoing scheduled basis that
Exactly.
we
By
can also
default, we
define of.
have kind of this conservative schedule about, hey, at least let's start on Sundays. But also, I mean, in the end, you do know what's kind of the busy time of your warehouses and whatnot, right? So this is kind of for you to kind of not start from a blank page, but you can still come here and say, hey, actually, my Snowflake, I have a backfill scheduled usually on Sundays. So maybe for me, it's a bit more interesting to run these pieces on Saturday or on Friday. So you can still come here and adapt all of these processes.
Makes sense. All right, we're at time. Hey, Ray, thank you so much for giving such a thorough deep dive into all the things that Open Metadata can do to help with improving discovery across the data teams and the business teams and creating context across all those different areas and domains. So to wrap up our monthly meetup, if you have any additional questions, please come join our Slack community. You can find Pare and the rest of the Open Metadata community there to help answer any questions you have, any support questions. Please join in our Slack and you can ask questions there. You can find us up on GitHub. I think I saw a question around when will 1.7 be coming out? You can actually see some of the 1.7 release candidates under release on GitHub. So stay tuned. I know the team's working very hard to get that out very soon. You can also find us on X, Twitter, if you follow our recent news and updates. And if you're more interested in some of the uh, additional features that Coley offers in our managed open metadata service. So we offer all of open metadata with some additional improvements. You saw some of the details that Prairie shared around some of the Colate AI agents to take the initial metadata ingestion and do additional work around tiering and documentation and quality. Come visit, check out our website. You can also try out our free tier, which offers a free managed version of open metadata that you can sign up for. We have a bit of a wait list. It's been a lot of demand. But you can go use that to get started today. And there's always our product sandbox available, so you can get started with open metadata with some demo data and try it out within just a couple of clicks. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time this April, and we'll look forward to you joining our next Open Metadata monthly meetup, where we will keep continuing the conversation. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.